Okay, well, hello, good evening.
Hello.
Nice to be here. You might think the Dancing Marquis, what's that got to do with? Well, Anglesey, of course, is a name that's well known around these parts. In fact, it always makes me nervous to give talks in this area because you probably know more than I do. John certainly knows more than I do. But this is quite an interesting thing to just have a little think about. I've been involved with Beaudesert for 20 odd years now, and the former chairman of Beaudesert, Mike Street, who some of you will know, local man, put a lot of talks together, and this is one of them. It was quite a nice, neat little talk that you'd have felt quite good about, but I've messed it up. I've posed lots of questions because I'm not sure that the way it was told is quite the way it was. So I'll pose you a number of questions as we go through, and where there is perhaps some uncertainty as to quite how things really were. But certainly the fifth Marquis was known by some as the Dancing Marquis. There's more of that later. He's also called the Bankrupt Baron, but that's not a very kind way of putting it, really, is it? It's true, he bankrupt, but that really puts a flavour on it. And I'm not quite sure it's as simple as that. This is Beaudesert at its height. I mean, again, I'm sure you've seen this. I know John gave you a talk on Beaudesert recently, and that's just a wonderful picture of the east facade of Beaudesert. As I say, when it was at its height. It changed a bit over time. There were various additions and extensions and so on, but that gives you a pretty good flavour of it. But the Marquis of Anglesey, why Anglesey if it's Beaudesert, which is just up the road? Well, this is a view of Plas Newydd, which is where the Marquis of Anglesey, that was their seat in Anglesey. And it's really all to do with family marriages and intermarriages that the Paget family got into relationships with the Bailey family and others who lived at Plas Newydd. So again, this is how the story is introduced. Wasted life. I think you'll probably agree by the end of the evening that that's true. Unbridled pursuits, resulting in the unashamed squandering of a huge private fortune. Well, unbridled pursuits, sure, we'll see some of those. I'm not sure whether it was an unashamed squandering of a huge private fortune. There's simply an unawareness of value, worth, wealth. People who've got countless wealth perhaps don't think that they're working their way through it. If you're a billionaire, I suppose you can squander a few million and it doesn't really matter. Yep. So you don't really notice. I mean, I'm sure you're all in that position. For the wish perhaps. So what I wanted to do as well was to put this in a bit of context and make a little bit of sense of it. So the Paget family took over Beaudesert at the dissolution of the monasteries. And that's how Beaudesert got its name, as we know, way back, Norman French, beautiful wilderness. It had been an ecclesiastical hunting lodge and then an ecclesiastical hall, still called a hunting lodge, but it was quite grand for that. Paget took it over, and so Beaudesert became tied to the Paget family fortunes. The Paget family had estates at Beaudesert. Through their various intermarriages, at one point they had about 30,000 acres in Dorset, Staffordshire, Anglesey. It was a very, very wealthy family. As I said, William Paget developed Beaudesert. It was he that put it was one of his successors, sorry, that put the east front onto the ecclesiastical manor and made it that east front that we just saw. made it into a really grand house and home. But the Paget family had got great deposits of coal and iron on their land. And that's really where a lot of their fortune came from. Being a large landowner, big farmer, they would have made a lot of money from that, but they made exceptional wealth out of the deposits of coal on their land. We know that the family had great interest in coal mines in this area, and they made a lot of money out of that. At one stage, they were the third richest family in the country. And that's quite something, really. So that was a real lot of money. For a lot of years, Beaudesert was the principal residence of the Paget family. Quite often, the family would choose to live at Beaudesert. They had a big house in London, Uxbridge House. They also had Newydd that we've just seen a picture of. But Beaudesert was often chosen as the prime place to live. I suppose it was a bit closer to London, a bit better connected transport-wise, and it was closer to the mineral deposits that they were making so much wealth from. So Beaudesert was the principal residence of the Paget family for several generations. Newydd was brought into the family through intermarriage, as I suggested, and the situation was that you had the Earl of Uxbridge up until the Battle of Waterloo. And again, you're probably familiar with how at the Battle of Waterloo, the Paget was the second in command of the cavalry. He led the charge that largely changed the battle in favour of the British, and as such he was made a Marquis, and he chose to be the Marquis of Anglesey. So that's how the Marquis of Anglesey came about, but it was the Paget family through intermarriage. There was one marriage, I can't remember exactly which, but where it was a condition of the marriage that the family kept the Paget name instead of the other names that were brought into the marriage. So there's an awful lot of management of the sort of dynasty here. So they're just a few things that help put it all in a bit of context. So the fifth Marquis, who wasn't yet the fifth Marquis, was styled Lord Paget up until 1880. And then between 1880 and 1898, he became the Earl of Uxbridge. And it was at that point, on the death of his father, the fourth Marquis, that he became the fifth Marquis of Anglesey. Now, this is the thing which I was saying to you. I'm not sure that this is quite fair, but this is how he was described, the black sheep of the family. He had don't worry, I'm not going to try and demonstrate this, but he had a sort of sinuous, sexy, snake-like dance that he liked to perform on the stage at any given chance, really. And as a result of that, he was called the Dancing Marquis. And his nickname was Toppy, so sometimes you'll hear him referred to as Toppy. I just wonder how he was the black sheep of the family, and you'll see a bit more as we come on to his upbringing. Mm-hmm. So he was born to the fourth Marquis's second wife, and his second wife had theatrical connections. And there were rumours that his real father was in fact the French classical actor Coquelin. I've read elsewhere that actually Coquelin was married to the sister of Blanche Boyd. And if that was the case, it's less likely that Coquelin was really the father. It's just these different rumours that persist. When his father, the fourth Marquis, died, he was raised by Coquelin's sister in Paris, until he was 8 years old. Now, if that was his aunt looking after him, I think that's much more plausible. If it was not, it gives room, room for all these rumours about impropriety and the French actress's, the French actor's wife. You can see how the rumours would circulate. He really took to the theatrical context in which he was brought up. He loved the performers, the artistic people. He was fascinated by the theatre. It would have been very exciting and very showy, and no doubt he was exposed to a great deal of this. And this very, very much coloured his upbringing. Now, a lot of people who have subsequently put him down felt that these foreign influences had a lot to do with why he was as he was. I don't think we know why he was as he was, but it suited some people to blame this foreign element. He left Paris when he was aged 8 and had to come back to England. And his father married for a third time to an American heiress and took him back to live at Plasnewydd. Father, apparently, the fourth Marquis, was a bit of a lad as well. He was engaged to a rich American heiress and then at the last minute ditched her and married a different American heiress. He seemed to play the field quite a bit, and emotional support was not really there for Toppy. He was very much left to his own devices and whatever influences there were around him. So he was quite isolated. He was said to be highly strung, but rich, we know. And imagination was perhaps the only companion for his loneliness. And he was being cared for by an ancient Scottish nurse of rather pious life, which sounds a bit deadly, really, doesn't it? I don't think there was much fun there, and it's very difficult to see if there was even much exhibition of love. He was pretty isolated. That can't have helped. He went to Eton, so it's a very privileged education, and he seems to have been quite bright. He had private tuition after Eton, but he did well. Painting and singing in Germany, he could speak fluent French, good Russian, grammatical Welsh, and I dare say he could speak a bit of German if he'd been educated there. So he's obviously quite bright, able, but again shunted around a bit, I suppose. And then for a brief time, he actually served as a lieutenant of the 2nd Volunteer Battalion of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. I don't think that was very successful because he was not a robust young man. He was quite delicate, really. And I think he was probably not, he wasn't a man's man, let's put it that way, at least. And I think he probably just didn't fit in too well to the military life. He came of age in June 1896, and there was an extravagant party at Plasnewydd. Fireworks, all sorts of things. 40,000 people visited over the course of this fortnight when his birthday was celebrated, but he was unwell. He actually missed it. He had a serious cold and was just unable to join in the celebrations, which sounds a bit odd to me, but what I'd also put to you is it suggests that there were people organising things for him. And I want to come back to that a bit later on because there seems to have been an absence of support of people organising things for him later on. But here, people put on these celebrations and he missed it. A bit later on, he married his cousin, Lynn Chetwynd. It was probably a marriage of convenience anyway, because these things were usually arranged, and it would have unlocked restrictions into the family fortunes. And it would have meant the intermarriage bound estates together and so on and so forth. He was very generous. When they were on honeymoon, they were walking around Paris, which is where they went to, and she looked in the jeweller's window and said, "Wow, it's all lovely, isn't it? You know, really nice." And he just went in and bought the lot. Oh, just bought the entire window display. He made her wear some of these jewels to the races, which she was not very keen on. She wasn't happy about such public shows of wealth and opulence, so she wasn't keen to be seen to be wearing all of these jewels. But he made her wear them. And then, this was rather peculiar. In their room on their honeymoon, there was no hanky-panky. He just made her lay naked on the bed and displayed his jewels on her body. And looked at them. And looked and looked. Which was really quite strange behaviour. And clearly she was not over pleased about this. But yes, he didn't touch her. No sex, he just stared. A lot of people thought that he was homosexual. Now, that's unproven. It was dangerous to be called a homosexual in those days because it was illegal. So clearly people weren't going to say that they were. I think, yes, there was a German almanac that listed him as such. But I don't know. There's no evidence to say that he was or that he wasn't. And this is another side to that story where people see that he just challenged the general laws of the time. He just decided to do what he wanted to do. And his true sexuality is still a complete mystery. And in a sense, it's irrelevant, of course, but it's something that's challenged people. In 1898, he actually inherited the title of the 5th Marquess on the death of his father, and he inherited the family estates. So quite vast estates, really. And his annual income from those estates was £110,000 a year, about 60 million in today's money, which is quite serious income. He stayed at Plas Newydd and had the chapel at the family home converted into a theatre so that he could pursue his theatrical interests. Cost a lot of money, great deal of money to convert the chapel. They renamed it as the Gaiety. It could seat 150 people, so it was no small thing. And it was modelled on the Opera House at Dresden. This year admission was free. I think it was a bit more than that. The servants were required to attend. It wasn't so much that they didn't have to pay, but the servants were drafted in to be the audience. And he and a few others put on shows. And that's a representation of it. Not a very good, I'm sorry, it's not a very good representation, but it's an old photograph. One of his favourite productions was Aladdin, and he liked to play the part of Pico. I'm not familiar with Aladdin as a production or what that part is, but it certainly involved him in frequent changes of costume, all of them bejewelled and very showy and glittery. And he just loved to dress up and put himself about on the stage. So the company that he set up, and he drafted in, he actually employed a number of very eminent actors. He paid well above the going rate to get them onto his troupe. And nonetheless, I believe the quality of the productions was not that good. So you see, a lot of the productions really focused on the Marquis and his extravagant costumes on which he would spend a fortune. And despite some of those leading professional actors, the productions very, very seldom got beyond what we would think of as a pantomime. And this is a picture of him in one of his fancy costumes. And there's this reference to a butterfly dance. He would, I mean, there he's wearing a winged helmet, but he would sometimes wear sort of winged costumes and do some sort of dance, which did something for him. I don't know what it did for his audience, but it certainly gained him this title of the Dancing Duke. He loved photography, particularly the photography of himself. And he used to have quite expensive postcards, and he'd just give them out to people in the audiences. Cost a lot of money, and they're all, you know, rather strange costumes perhaps. But he liked to just pose in costume and have these postcards made and give them out to people. Of course, some of the Welsh chapels didn't think a lot of the theatre, and it was thought of as a place of dubious morals by the local clergy, perhaps. Again, I don't know that there's any evidence for that, but again, it's this thing about people who like to scandalise if they can. And some of those who attended the theatre were actually named from the pulpit to try and discourage them from going. It is said that some of the plays, if you know Beaudesert at all, there's a sort of an amphitheatre or a campfire circle on the site, and it makes quite a good open-air theatre. And apparently some of the plays were also performed there, because the company did go on tour as well. We went on a 3-year tour with scenery and an orchestra. All of this, remember, he's paying for 50 people and 5 truckloads of luggage. It's going to cost a lot of money. You can see how he's beginning to spend the family fortune. The Marquis used to sit in his own car, which was a one-off, specially designed. Very early days for motor vehicles, so a lot of them would be hand-built, but his was particularly special, and he liked to sit there hugging his jewellery case with, in today's value, about 15 million quid worth of jewellery. Car resembled a Pullman railway carriage. Had 4 leather armchairs, one in each corner, polished mahogany woodwork, and a Louis XV style decoration on the ceiling. He actually had an injector fitted so that he could get perfume into the exhaust to try and make it smell nicer. And he had, well, there it says, £500 million on jewelled costumes and pink poodles. That's, again, not a very good picture, but that shows you the car. And this is the Pullman type body. Well, his wife was clearly not enchanted by her husband, not by any of it, and they became estranged, and that gave Paget even more chance to just go ahead and indulge himself. And by this time, he's actually starting to mortgage the estate to keep the cash coming in. And that's a very slippery slope, of course. Eventually, his wife got a divorce on the 7th of November, annulled due to non-consummation. and he just kept buying jewels. He loved to buy jewels. He also wasted jewels. Occasionally, he would just scatter them into a fire or something. He'd just throw them about. He'd just, during a theatrical performance, he would just scatter jewels. He had no sense of the worth of them. And pretty much every jeweller in Europe knew that if they got a good stone, they could contact his agent and he'd be very interested in buying them. I'm not sure that he was the most eccentric English aristocrat ever. I've had some pretty eccentric ones, but he was certainly up there. I've got a couple of reports and things from which we've drawn some of this, and you know, it's a bit like the press today. They really do like to bring people down, so they would certainly be having a go at them.